right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry I'm not here today. My voice is still obviously gone, but hopefully having this available to you guys will help get through all the information you need. So let's pick up right where we left off, talking about Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, one of the ways he was able to gain power in his regime was by turning to scapegoats. In his system, of fascism, the scapegoats were Jews. And that was through anti-Semitism, a fear of the Jewish people, a hatred of the Jewish people, and it was widespread. And anti-Semitism wasn't a new thing necessarily, but he stoked this fear more than anybody else. And he outlines his fear of Jews in his book called Mein Kampf. So Hitler's arrested in 1923 for trying to overthrow the government. So he's a revolutionary for a while. And he gets sent into prison. While in prison and pacing in his jail cell, he talks about all of his thoughts and ideas, and they outline them in a book called Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. And in Hitler's book, he explains what he sees as the problems facing Germany. And it's that there are superior and inferior races in Germany. He outlines a superior race known as the Aryan race of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Germans. He identifies Jews as the inferior race, and also communists. He talks about Russians are inferior, Czechs are inferior, and he just talks about how all these other groups are holding back the German people from their full capabilities. So, and he also outlines in this book how we should exterminate these inferior races. So there's only the superior races left, and it'll be a more, awesome human race. So it's incredible. He wrote this in 1923, 24. So when the Holocaust happened, nobody really should have been surprised by the fact that he took these steps. The government that was in charge when he started to assume power was called the Weimar Republic. We already talked about some of the hard economic times, the hyperinflation, the failed regulations of the German government. You have the German president, Hindenburg, who is a war hero, and he actually defeats Hitler in a popular election in 1931, but he ultimately cannot control all of the different groups competing for power. The Nazi Party ends up gaining a plurality of the seats in the German Reichstag, their legislature. And there are communists, there are socialists, there are Republicans. There are all these different groups of people in the legislature that are not Nazis, but he gets appointed as chancellor, and they start silencing their opposition. Hitler begins rounding up and killing opposition. He begins creating the concentration camps in 1933-34, beginning with Dachau. And, people are turning to Hitler because their lives are getting better. We've talked about this before. They're killing the political and social opposition. But if you're the average German, you are getting a job. You're seeing your country improve. So you're more willing to do this. Okay. The last empire that we fight is Japan. So Japan and militarism, Germany militarizes their society. The Soviet Union militarizes their society. Italy militarizes their society. So does Japan. But Japan is different politically. They have an emperor who is, seen as their infallible deity, essentially. Okay, so he is a king, essentially. The emperor is. But Hirohito was a marine biologist. Okay, he was interested in sea life. He wasn't a military captain, but he was aloof, meaning he was outside of the government, really. He could have stepped in and taken more power and authority, but you have an army general named Hideki Tojo that really becomes the leader. There's no one leader. There's panels of leaders of different parts of the government, but Tojo is the prime minister, the army leader, the most significant figure there. And while they're going through the depression and their economy's collapsing, they see the best option for them to invade foreign markets, to expand their economy. So as an island nation, they can't just go next door and invade. They had to go across the sea, and they invade Manchuria, which is northern China. And that's really when you can say World War II starts, is when Japan starts their aggression. And Hirohito doesn't do anything about it, Tojo is the one leading this assault. But what about the League of Nations, Mr. McCurr? I thought in World War I, we created this international organization to prevent Japan and other nations from invading peaceful nations. Well, they had no standing army. They couldn't enforce their decisions. So when Italy becomes aggressive, when Japan becomes aggressive, they can't do anything except for what I call the wag of the finger power. They wag their finger and they say, you better not do that or else we're going to be mad at you. You're going to be in trouble, okay? I always try to put this in a school perspective. Like, if you walked up and just punched me in the face in the middle of class and I send you down to the principal's office and Mr. Bidding just says, now stop punching your teachers. We don't like that. It's not going to change your behavior, okay? There's got to be ramifications to your negative actions. The League of Nations doesn't do anything, okay? So, like I said earlier, Japan invades Manchuria. You can see Manchuria right here, this northern area of China between Russia, Mongolia, and China, a resource-rich region with a lot of iron ore and oil. So they invade there for resources. They felt like they deserved it after World War I as well for helping out on the winning side. And they want to create all of Asia as their sphere of influence. So even going farther back historically, Japan rapidly industrializes. After the United States opens them up in the 1850s, they win the Russo-Japanese War in the early 1900s. They're a world power. They have a military that can compete with anybody. Meanwhile, Hitler begins his aggression. He sends troops into this non-militarized zone between Germany and France to prevent future wars from breaking out called the Rhineland. So he breaks the Treaty of Versailles, and he claims Lebensraum. This is something he talks about in Mein Kampf. Germans need more living space. As a superior race, they need more places to live. And all German speakers and all ethnic Germans should be under one country. Mussolini wants to flex Italian muscles as well and spread their power since they did not gain any territory in the end of World War I as well. They invade a weak African nation, Ethiopia, that you can see right here. And the reason he chooses this territory is because he thinks it'll be an easy win for the Italians because it's a weak, largely rural African nation. And they actually struggle a little bit. They have a difficult time defeating the Ethiopian military and subduing the people there. So it's not as glorious as a win as Mussolini wants. And it's also kind of foreshadowing the rest of the war where Japan and Germany are dominating throughout their regions. And Italy is kind of stumbling along on the coattails of their allies. Okay. Meanwhile, in Spain, a fascist rebellion is going on and a civil war led by this general down here named Francisco Franco. And Franco reaches out to Hitler and Mussolini for aid to win in this civil war and overthrow the democratically elected government. And Hitler eagerly agrees to help, not because of his belief in fascism in Spain, but because he wants to test out some of his new battle strategies. That includes the Blitzkrieg and his new air force, the Luftwaffe. So Germany's becoming aggressive. Italy's becoming aggressive. Japan's becoming aggressive. What's the world doing about it? Neville Chamberlain is the prime minister of Great Britain at the time, and he sits down and meets with Hitler to talk about these aggressive strategies and the violations of the Treaty of Versailles. And ultimately, Neville Chamberlain does nothing. He believes he's created peace in our times, where he essentially agrees with Hitler's demands to avoid war. So he kind of says, you know what, Hitler, you make a good point that Austrians and people in Sudetenland that are Germans should be under German rule. We'll allow you to take these minor territories, and then you're done. And then you have to stop expanding. So they give him what he wants in exchange for peace in the future. And that's what your assignment's going to be about today. You're going to work in a group that's been predetermined for you to look at arguments for and against appeasement of Hitler during World War I. That's all I have for you today, guys. Looking forward to see you tomorrow. Have a great day.